Comment allez-vous? Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and you have probably noticed that I really enjoy space aid travel. Not only because it's a military perk that can save you thousands of dollars with international travel, but also because it provides an opportunity to have some real high-quality family experiences. Of course, one of the challenges that you're going to face when you start traveling internationally is just the language barrier. If you go anywhere, eventually you're going to end up someplace where nobody speaks the same language that you do. In fact, I would argue that this aspect about the language barrier is one of the reasons that people avoid space aid travel, even though it is also one of the factors that helps fuse your family as a team. So let's talk about some strategies to deal with this and to get you out there. Number one, you cannot learn any language well enough in a couple of weeks to get to the point that you can survive without eventually falling back on English. I mean, probably there is some kind of language savant out there, but even that dude, well, his wife, his kids, well, they're not going to learn the language well enough for a 2-week vacation. And what that means is you are going to have to use English. In fact, people are going to peg you as an American the second you start talking. And as a result, you have to prioritize what you're going to learn. Number two, the more American and English-speaking tourists that an area experiences, the more likely you are to run into people who can communicate with you in English. Signs, menus, brochures, well, they're all more likely to be in English in some central tourist area. But as you radiate out from those touristy centers, the likelihood that you're going to run into people who can speak English gets lower and lower. Now, you guys might remember that my wife and I, we like to hit the ground, get a car, and then get the heck away from the base where we initially arrived at. And the reason we like to do that is to save the activities that are located close to a passenger terminal for when we return, and we might have to fill a day or two while we wait for a flight back home. But if you're new to international travel, you might want to take a day or two and stay close to that military base or that touristy area so that you can get your bearings before you go out looking for adventure. In the meantime, consider a couple of these strategies. If you're going to learn the foreign language, it's a good idea to start with some basic human sentiments. I need help. Please. Thank you. Where is the bathroom? Think about the phrases that a 3-year-old uses and then learn those, because, after all, those are the simplest and most important phrases that anybody needs. Next, if you're going to have to speak English in a conversation, it's best to start that conversation by speaking English. For example, suppose you want to know where you can clean your dirty laundry. You probably are not going to know all the words that are necessary to have a conversation about a laundry room or valet service or a nearby dry cleaner or laundromat. So, rather than going to the front desk and starting in the local language and then having to switch to English, just start with English. I often begin the conversation by very clearly saying "good morning" in English as a signal that I intend to use English to have this conversation. And a lot of times, the person that I approach, well, they turn to a coworker and tap them because that guy's the one who's good at speaking English. By starting in English, I avoid having to switch between clerks mid-conversation. Of course, by now you're probably thinking, well, I'll just download one of those translator apps on my phone, and that's probably a good idea, but I would offer this caution. Beware of translation apps that rely on a good Wi-Fi signal or cellular service. Remember It is in the most remote areas that you will run into the most extreme language barrier. And those remote areas, well, they tend to have the worst cellular service. Personally, I'm a big fan of a pointy talkie. Just a sheet of paper with pictures that express basic concepts that you might need to communicate. And a willingness to play an impromptu game of Pictionary or charades. You will be surprised at how self-satisfied people are when they finally figure out that you're looking for the keys to the gate to the swimming pool, and they get all that just from your wild gestures. Now, before we wrap up, I do have one cautionary observation. Americans are unusually good at understanding broken English. Imagine talking to someone from China who doesn't speak good English, and then speaking to someone from Guatemala, and then speaking to somebody from, say, Saudi Arabia whose English is poor. Many Americans can not only understand broken English unusually well, but we can also switch between different versions of broken English. In fact, heavily accented English, well, it's kind of the norm for Americans. But that is not so with the speakers of many foreign languages. Their ears are simply not tuned to thickly accented versions of their own language. My point being that you are probably better at understanding their bad English than they are at understanding your bad Hindi. So look, Space A is a fantastic way to get some international travel at a fraction of the cost. If you have any qualms about doing it, leave me a comment and we'll see what we can do about addressing those issues. In the meantime, there are 3 key steps to the Space A process, and if you want to understand them, watch this video.